Welcome to Love and My Daughter-in-Law podcast, where my mother-in-law, relationship expert and master certified coach, Leah Austin, will help you create more love and connection with your daughter-in-law and everyone else you care about.
Hey y'all, welcome to Love and My Daughter-in-Law, episode number 120, Love You More with Leah Davidson. I love observing and connecting with other humans, especially noting how they feel and implement love into their lives and their relationships. We have the amazing Leah sharing some beautiful love and relationship insights with us today. All right, Leah, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am a life coach and a speech language pathologist, and I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, with my husband Rob, and we are recent empty nesters. I love saying that because it's almost like I feel like I'm saying we're recent honeymooners, but we're we're recent empty nesters. We have a beautiful blended family of five children who are all um, three of them are married. Two of them are still, they come back to the nest every once in a while, and most of them have some storage still in our nest here, but but we love having them. And I am passionate about travel, about the nervous system, which is what my big specialty is, so to speak. I'm passionate about the brain. I'm passionate about relationships and reading and learning and just so many different things.
I admire so many things about that. First off, empty nester, isn't it amazing? It's kind of
Ah,
really
it
fun,
really
huh?
is.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes it's like, wait a second. And then, but yeah,
It
after
has
the
its
first
moments
week,
for
yeah,
sure.
yes,
I'm not gonna say that I haven't shed some tears and sent some texts into our family chat about like, well, I miss everybody. I miss the
yes,
days where I was making lunches, and I can't believe I've ever said that. But yeah,
yeah.
for sure, it has the ups and downs. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then just all of the things that you're doing. Like I'm so curious and interested in the whole nervous system and everything. That's so exciting. So I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
glad you're here. So, all
Thanks for
right.
having me.
Well, I've got 5 questions today we'll go through. And the first one is, how do you incorporate love into your business and life? And how does that impact your relationships?
So, with that one, I was thinking, how do I incorporate? And I think the simplest thing, I just love the people that I work with, and I love the people in my life. And I remember years ago, I was at an amusement park with one of my kids. And so I've been a speech pathologist for 25 years. So I have worked quite closely with a lot of people because when normally the people that I work with have experienced traumatic brain injuries. And so I'll be in their life quite intimately finding out about their life. And I
Mm.
was at an amusement park and I bumped into one of my clients there and I was with my son. And this client, I was not going to say he's one of my clients because there's confidentiality, but he openly said to my son, your mom is my speech pathologist. And he gave my son some stories.
Wow.
And my son sort of, he was around 10 or so. So this is a long time ago. And my son just sort of was like, yeah, that's my mom. Yeah, that's my mom. And we sort of chuckled afterwards as I was talking with him because I said to him, it's so important for me to be authentic and to really just be myself. And I do love most people. I try to love all people. And I think whether you are in my life as my friend or as my client or, as part of my family, I try to make love a priority. And I know that sometimes within a profession, that's not how things go. Like we try to separate things, but I have found so much satisfaction and joy in my profession because I love my clients. Now, it's also ends up causing some, burnout and compassion fatigue, and that's all the nervous system stuff, which is why I started learning about that. But I just think I do try to authentically love the people that I'm working with. It just makes it so much more enjoyable to be working with them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you can tell you do because you radiate that. Then it makes people want to connect with you. And, I love that. You know,
Awesome.
awesome. All right. So, what is something you love about you and why?
Well, one of the things is that authenticity piece, I think.
Mhm.
I had another experience with a client he was a young client, early 20s when I started working with him. He was a student in university. And within the first couple of months, I was also, I'm sort of a motherly figure too. So like this 20 something year old doesn't really want to work with, and this is going back at least ten years ago. So this 40 something year old woman. And he just said to me, you know what? You annoy me. You're just so fake. And he's like, you're smiley and you're positive and you're trying to be kind and loving. And it drives me insane. And I was just like,
Wow.
oh, okay. Well, we have a couple of options here. One is you can find yourself a new speech pathologist. I didn't say it rudely like that, but I was like, it's always an option. You don't have to work with me. And two, I do want you to know I am genuine and I am authentic. And he was just like, okay, whatever. I ended up working with him about 8 years in total.
Wow. Oh my
And
goodness.
after about year five, I mean, we really had a relationship where he trusted me and he shared a lot about of things with his life. And I remember after about year five, I said to him, "Do you still think I'm fake and annoying and not genuine?" And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you remember that conversation." And he's like, "I've thought about that conversation many times." And I just said, it's fine. It's total. I probably would have thought the same thing, but I do love that about myself. And then I'd say the other thing that I love on more of a personal level is I'm a very committed, loyal person, which
Mm.
can get me into trouble at times. But if I say it, I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And that was something. I got divorced when my kids were very, very young.
Mhm.
And obviously, divorce causes a lot of turmoil in children's lives, and there was a lot of uncertainty in their life. And my boys used to always say to me, "Promise, promise," because if promised, they felt a sense of security. And it was so funny that when I got remarried and we blended our family, and my boys had now step siblings, their step siblings in a very loving, kind way used to always joke with them about how they would talk with me and say, "Promise, mom, promise." But the promise was like a reassurance of commitment.
Mm.
And it just allowed me to really be thinking about I obviously sometimes things happen, and I would share that with them too, where I wouldn't be able to fulfill what I said, but I like to very deliberately and carefully watch what I'm committing to and what I say, because I do want to follow through with that.
Mhm.
And if I can't commit to it, then I better not say it,
Mm.
or not hold myself to such strictness with it, then just be more careful about the words that I use to commit myself.
I love that. I just love how intentional you are about that too. And
Yeah.
that's so tender. The promise,
Yeah.
mom. I love that.
Well, and then it became a joke because they would say things around Christmas time, and I'd be like, "You're not allowed to be
Oh.
asking Christmas time." And so they would switch it out. They would say things like "promise," like "I promise," which they knew meant that I don't really promise, but
That's right. Just kidding. Yeah.
kidding.
Oh, I love it. All right. So I love talking about connection with others and ourselves. And I think the daughter-in-law relationship is packed full of examples for us to learn from. So any thoughts
Absolutely.
about being a daughter-in-law or your daughters-in-law?
Oh, you've just opened up a can of worms. I have so many thoughts about this. Because I've been divorced, I've had two mother-in-laws in my life. So I got to see, different styles of mother-in-laws, and I also have two daughter-in-laws.
Mm.
So I get to see the style. And what I've sort of determined over the years is it doesn't land on the mother-in-law or the daughter-in-law. It is a real relationship
Yes.
that requires a lot of give and take. Um,
Mhm.
I know as a daughter-in-law, like I said, I had two, so I was able to, you sort of see what you like and what you don't like. One
Mhm.
of the things that I try to remind myself of, because both mother-in-laws at some points, quote unquote, annoyed me, I would really remind myself that regardless of any issues that I had, this was a woman who was, partially responsible for getting my husband into the world and raising him. And
Mhm.
there was such a fundamental role that she played. And if I did love my husband, then obviously she did something right, that there is, having that level of respect. So really taking my judgmental lens off. Sometimes I know that I walked into a situation like, I can't believe you did that, and your family raised you like that, or removing this judgmental lens and just noticing that families do things differently. And obviously there were some great things, and obviously just like in my own family, there were some things. But I worked hard because I knew that a poor relationship with my mother-in-law would
Mhm.
very much impact my children. And
Mm.
that was a concern for me. I never wanted to be in a situation that, even if I did have some issues,
Mhm.
I didn't want that to impact my children. And I think I see that with people. If you have challenges with your mother-in-law, like, be careful. It's generational. Now, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying like for mother-in-laws, if you have situations that were abusive, or, I
Right.
actually, my late mother-in-law, she was an alcoholic, and we had to set some very firm boundaries with her about being with the kids and so forth. But I also recognize that I set the tone about how we talked about my mother-in-law in our home,
Mm.
even though she had some
Absolutely.
challenges.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
this was a part of my children, regardless of my relationships, like genetically, nervous system wise, it's all passed down. So to really be able to respect that. So that's sort of my views on the mother-in-law.
Uh-huh.
And then from the perspective of the daughter-in-law,
Uh-huh.
it's interesting because I feel for my daughter-in-laws because they have some more complications. They've stepped into homes that were divorced.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit trickier for them. I have, for one of my daughter-in-laws, my step daughter-in-law, I don't refer to her as that, but
Uh-huh.
she's married to my stepson.
Uh-huh.
She did step into a situation that wasn't really amicable, that we've never had a great relationship. And so she is juggling this world of two mother-in-laws who don't necessarily see eye to eye, but both
Mm.
were heavily involved in raising her son. So I think when she got married and entered into our family, she wasn't sure what she was getting into, and she was walking on some landmines. And I do
Mhm.
feel for her. She's, over the years, beautifully learned how to, just recognize. She just openly says, it's like my husband has two families, and I have
Ah,
two
that's how
mother-in-laws.
she handles it.
That's
Yeah.
how she handles it. My other daughter-in-law has, her parents are divorced as well, so I think she was a little bit more familiar with all the little land bombs that she was going to have to, or landmines she was going to have to walk around.
Mhm.
Um, and so that, I think, made it a little bit easier for her because she understood the dynamics, but I had also known her a little bit longer. But I
Mm.
think, regardless of all those things, I think what has really worked for me, or what I've tried to do, is establishing a relationship with my daughter-in-laws individually, not having everything run through my son or my stepson. Like,
Ah.
I want to get to know my daughter-in-laws. Like, I love that they're married to my son and my stepson. I love that, and that they have beautiful relationships and they take care of each other. But I want to know them as people. Like,
Yes.
what drives them? What are their ambitions? What are their vulnerabilities? And so really trying to take an active interest in their life. And of course, that's a balancing act too, because I don't want to be too overly involved, but not, you feel
Mhm.
like, as a mother-in-law, you walk on eggshells a little bit, but just like being open to asking questions, open to having conversations. I want to get to know them,
Mhm.
at the same time recognizing that this is their family now. They have their own
Right.
space.
Yes.
Um, and I think that can be a transition. I
Uh-huh.
know that with when my daughter-in-law married my stepson, it was probably a little bit less of a transition for me because I was never his number one, so to speak. Like, he has a
Mm.
biological mother. I was a stepmother. I had a prominent role in his life, but I always knew I wasn't sort of like that number one that all little boys have, in my opinion. With
Uh-huh.
my son, when he got married, I was his number one for many, many, many years.
Mhm.
And instead of seeing it as like she's come in and she's taken over and he no longer has me, it really was a welcoming of her into the family with both of my daughter-in-laws, and also
Mhm.
this recognition of you're his number one now. And
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that you're his number one.
Mhm.
I hope that I'll always have a role
Uh-huh.
in his life. And I feel that the more we embrace our daughter-in-laws, the more we are likely to have some type of role in their life.
Abs Absolutely. And passing that on to them. I love how it is like now you're his number one and
That's
not
right.
holding him tight, like, oh no, what am I gonna do?
Yeah. And we joke about it too sometimes. If, one of them is having an issue, I'll be like, well, he's your number one. So
Good luck with
not
that.
my problem.
That's
I don't have
right.
to deal with that. But I think those are the things. It's the combination of really being interested in them as people and not just as partners to my children, and allowing them to have the space
Yes.
um, to build their own family. It's also tricky because I think I I look at it takes a village to raise a family,
Mhm.
and I look at the benefit of seeking wisdom from our parental figures. I remember when I married my husband, I was in my second marriage, I was in my mid 30s. We both had children,
Mhm.
and I was so taken by how my husband talked to his father very, very frequently and asked his dad for advice.
Mm.
And it was sort of like, things going on at work, and he would just share, and his dad would sort of give him input. And it wasn't like my husband needed the advice. And
Mm.
I always thought that was interesting. And I had conversations with my husband about it. And he's like, I don't feel like I need to talk to my husband, my father, or I want to talk. I like to get his perspective. I
Ah.
like to get his viewpoint. And
Mm.
I have some of, all our kids are different at different stages.
Mhm.
And I have some of my kids who I know like to talk to us. Our two of the boys who have the daughter-in-laws, they are very much like that. And
Mhm.
I hope that my daughter-in-laws know that when they come to us asking, and what do you think? It's not because they need our permission. It's not
Mhm.
because they're not capable, or they can't talk about it with their partner. It's just for some decisions, it is helpful to get some input from people that maybe are a few steps ahead of you or that you respect. And
Yeah.
I think that can be tricky for some relationships.
Mhm.
I've seen it like in other, and even I have a son-in-law as well, that I think it may be a little bit more challenging. Like, well, why are you asking your parents? We're not
Mm.
asking your parents for permission. This
Right.
is sort of, as a family, we're here to
Right.
provide. And I
Yeah.
think that can be tricky for some of the in-laws. And I really do love how both my daughter-in-laws have totally embraced that. Like, we
Uh-huh.
make our own decisions in our own family, but I get that my boys are going to want to, our husbands are going to want to maybe talk through things with our
Yes.
parents, and
Yes.
being able to embrace that.
Well, and it makes sense too when you're focused on them individually, the daughter-in-laws individually, and getting to know them, then that gives them space to be like, okay, wait, they're not trying to control us, they're not trying to do any of that. We're a family and we like to, share our thoughts and get different perspectives. So that is
Yeah.
so beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I
Oh,
mean, it can be hard because I think daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws are raised in different families.
right.
And
Right.
when we are in different, I think the benefit, see, there's benefits when you get divorced. When you are divorced and you are a child living in two homes, you start to realize that families do things differently. And
Yes.
because both are your families, your brain and your nervous system have to adapt to different ways of doing things and create that both ways can be good. And
Yes.
so when you step into a third or a fourth family, if you're marrying somebody who is divorced, sometimes it can be hard. Well, why do they do it like that? That's weird. that they're not used to having maybe a different viewpoint or a different perspective.
Mhm.
And, kids who have been divorced, they're sort of like, oh, it's just one more perspective. Whereas I think sometimes it
Mm.
can be hard for somebody who comes into a new family, like, well, why do they do that? That's weird that they do that. Instead of seeing it as, oh, this is so cool. It's a different way. We are going to be able to take from my family, take from his family, and create our own version of what we want it to look like within our family.
Yes, yes. We get to take all the things that we like and blend them together. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Yes. Ah,
Yeah.
all right. Well, Leah, is there anything else you'd like to share? And where can our audience go to find out more about you?
I am on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching, and I have a podcast called Building Resilience. So you can find
Yes.
out all about things there. And
Okay.
we have lots of discussions about relationships and resilience and nervous system and brain and mindset and all sorts of good things.
I love it. And I'll put those in the show notes as well. But I am so excited because Leah will be coming to my Connection Crew program and teaching in June on June 4th. So, anyone, if you want to come to an amazing class and learn to befriend your nervous system, join Connection Crew today because then you get to experience the nervous system with Leah, as well as 30 days in my program. So I encourage you to do that if that's something you're interested in as well. And I'll put all of this in the show notes. So, all right. So, last question. What is your favorite question or quote about love, and how have you used it for yourself and in your relationships?
I couldn't come up with a formal quote, but I just came up with love you more. And I was trying to think of, a formal quote, and I ended up just looking in our dining room. We have a big sign over our entrance into it that says, Love you more. And then in our family room, we have a pillow on it that says, Love you more. And I had bought those because it is something that I have just always said that when my kids say, Love you, it's love you more. Every
Oh,
note that I have ever signed is love you more. I always wanted my kids to feel that it's immeasurable how much I love them. That even if they think that, I know you love me, no, I love you more. So it always became a joke. I was just like, I can be competitive too, and I will always win with this one. I always love you more. And then it sets for me the challenge that really the solution for so many things is just to love more. And when we, are confronted with challenges in relationships, I'm trying to figure out what to do. Well, what would it look like if I just loved more? And that usually puts me in the right direction of where I need to be going.
that is so beautiful. Love you more. Something to
Yeah.
think about. Ah, thank you, Leah, for
You're
sharing your
so
love
welcome.
insights with us. I love it. So
Thanks
have
for
a good,
having me.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Have a good one, y'all. And here's to love you more and connection. Leah will be teaching our class in Connection Crew program on June 4th. So if you want to come and enjoy this incredible experience with her and learn how to befriend your nervous system, join us. It's only $45 for Leah's expert teaching and somatic practices that you can implement into your life right now, plus 30 days in my Connection Crew program, which is the best deal ever. So join us today. I'll put all the info in the show notes. Have a good one, y'all.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out Leanne's Connection Crew program, where she coaches and teaches a variety of ways to have more fun and connection in our relationships. Leanne also shares the 5 secrets she uses to create a beautiful relationship with me and her other daughter-in-law. She's the real deal. I highly recommend you check this out. And if you want one easy question you can keep in your back pocket and use to increase the love you feel for your daughter-in-law today, go to leanneaustin.com and get the one question.